Hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video we're discussing New Moon, written by Stephenie Meyer, book 2 in the Twilight series, and I know so many people have read these books already. I haven't. I've read Twilight. Now this book was a bit better than Twilight, not by much. It's better because Jacob's character is just developed more, and his development was actually quite good. I think he's developed as the best character so far in the first 2 books anyway. Protagonist Bella still irritates me. I know she's the main character. I know so many people out there love Bella as a character, but I don't. She irritates me. The way she's written, her development is just, it's frustrating. It's annoying. I don't like her as a main character. She's not compelling. She's not gripping. She really doesn't have that many redeeming features either in these books, in the first 2 books anyway, for me as a reader. So I don't know. I don't know what it is about these books. I'm aware I'm not the target audience, but I have read books before where I'm not the target audience, and I've found things to enjoy in those books. And in this series so far, these first 2 books, there's not much for me to enjoy. When we start this book, we realise that from the events in book 1, there's no consequences really for the characters in book 2. It's like those TV sitcoms where something happens in one episode and it doesn't matter. Everything in the next episode is just rewound and back to 0. It felt like that in this book. Bella is more worried about turning 18 than anything that happened in the first book. Why? Because she doesn't want to be a year older than Edward, and she's terrified of that. For some reason, being older than Edward is the worst thing that can happen in the world. And she's so down about the fact that she's turning 18. She doesn't want a birthday party, doesn't want gifts, just doesn't want anybody even saying happy birthday to her. So she goes through this whole day of her birthday just grumbling and mumbling, usual Bella, because nothing much changes, because in book 1, Bella was grumbling and mumbling all the way through that anyway. But the Cullens, mainly Alice, Edward's sister, decides to throw Bella a party. And is Bella happy about that? No. So despite all the effort Alice goes to, despite throwing a great party, we only get to see a little bit of that party, by the way, not much, because something happens at the very start, and that throws that whole party into disarray. But Bella complains about going to that party for the whole day. She'd rather do homework than go to that party. She'd rather do anything to go to that party. But she goes, and then disaster strikes and something happens. It turns Bella's life upside down. And just before we jump ahead, I have to say that another reason Bella doesn't want to turn 18 is because she wants to become a vampire herself, and she wants to be 17 forever, just like Edward. She wants them both to be the same age for all eternity, because it just seems like they're destined to be the same age together for all eternity. But guess what, Bella? Not going to happen. You will turn 18 in this book, and you will be older than Edward. So Bella just has to, deal with that. And how does she deal with that? Well, at the birthday party, there is a bit of a commotion, like I said. She cuts her finger on a piece of paper, and that blood drives Edward's brother Jasper into just fits of wanting to drain Bella dry of her blood, basically. He can't help himself, and he reaches out to attack Bella. Edward pushes Bella away. Bella fumbles over a table, and they've got glass plates and bowls and things at this table, at this birthday party. I mean, who does that? Who would have glass plates and bowls and things at a party, knowing Bella's going to be there? Because from book 1, we learned that Bella was clumsy. She's clumsy all the time. And you'd think Edward would know that already, because Edward just basically follows her around all the time, never leaves her alone. So why doesn't Edward know Bella's so clumsy? Don't have glass plates and bowls. Just have something that won't break. Have plastic. That's all you have to have around Bella is plastic plates and bowls and knives and forks. In fact, don't have knives and forks, because in this book, Bella's so clumsy that if you had knives and forks around, even plastic ones, she'd find a way to hurt herself. And she has hurt herself at this party. And that throws everything into disarray. And from that event, Edward's so upset because of it, because Bella's a bit clumsy, because I think he pushed her away actually and caused it to happen. And Bella cuts herself more on these glass plates and bowls because they break. And then Edward's all upset because of that. and he drives her home, is all grumpy, won't talk to her, and Bella thinks it's her fault, and there we have this whole relationship between them that feels just so wrong, that it's so controlling that Bella thinks she's always at fault. She has to apologise to Edward all the time, even when it's not her fault. Then we have the start of Act 2 in this book, because Edward and his family, they pack up and they leave Forks forever. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to leave Bella in charge of herself. It's the worst idea possible. And what happens after that? Bella spends months, and I mean months, auditioning for a zombie movie, basically. And she lands the role with flying colours. For months. We have actually chapters named after months, and there's nothing there, just a month and a month and a month. And she spends a time in this zombie-like state that's longer than her relationship with Edward in the first place. That seems a bit odd to me. Anyway, Bella is so emotional, she loves Edward so much, they're destined to be together, she's sure of it, and then her heart's torn out, she feels empty, she feels like she's got a hole in her body. We're told about the hole in her body for so many times in this story, time and again, it's repetitive. And then Bella has a grand idea. She's going to befriend Jacob again, because she wasn't spending much time with Jacob, and remember, Jacob is a friend. Bella's father and Jacob's father are both good friends, and Jacob's almost family to Bella. But Bella was ignoring him because of her relationship with Edward. But now, she decides that Jacob's okay again. She's going to be friends with Jacob, best friends. So she coerces Jacob into being her friend by getting these two motorcycles that were garbage basically. Somehow she chances upon them. She takes them round to Jacob's house and asks Jacob to help her fix them up. She'll buy all the parts if he does all the labour. And Jacob loves this idea. And we find out as this book goes on, Jacob starts feeling heavy emotions towards Bella. Stronger and stronger and stronger. It just seems that everybody, every male anyway, that Bella comes in contact with can't help themselves. Bella has some power over the entire teenage male race in this series. And then we start kind of Act 3 in this story, because Jacob amazingly repairs both motorcycles, and then they decide to ride them. Before Bella can ride them, she hears Edward's voice in her head saying, "No, don't do it, you'll hurt yourself," because that voice already knows Bella's a clumsy oaf. Bella's going to do something, she'll fall over, the bike will fall on her before she even gets to ride the bike. That's what this voice is probably trying to tell her, because she's so clumsy. But she ignores the voice and rides it anyway. And guess what? She hurts herself, because anything she does, she's going to hurt herself. But then she's addicted. She becomes addicted to the voice, because it's Edward's voice in her head. And hearing Edward's voice in her head somehow just fills up the hole inside her. And she decides she'll do just challenging things or dangerous things to hear that voice time and time again. It's a rush for her. That's all Act 3 in this story. Bella being reckless to hear that voice, because she's sure it's Edward's voice watching over her. I don't know if it was or not, but, how could Edward, hundreds of miles away, watch over her anyway? Is there some link? Maybe Bella thinks there's a psychic link between them. It's proof they're destined to be together. Who knows in this story? But that voice is addictive to her, so she's reckless time and time again. And Bella being reckless leads us into Act 4. And Act 4 of the Edward and Bella story is Bella decides to go cliff diving, because it's so safe for somebody so clumsy to go cliff diving. So anyway, Bella jumps off a cliff. Alice, Edward's sister, and Alice is a bit psychic. Alice sees this, and for some reason she's sure that Bella's trying to unlive herself. And that causes Edward to do something reckless. He decides he can't live without Bella, and he rushes off to Italy to go to this vampire clan, this, famous and very strong and very dangerous vampire clan, to cause mayhem in their city, and he wants them to destroy him. And if they won't destroy him, he'll go walk in sunlight or something and destroy himself. And of course, Bella survives that dive. She's rescued by Jacob, because now Jacob is strong, because Jacob becomes a werewolf. And then Bella finds out of Edward's plan, and then Alice and Bella rush off to Italy to save Edward. It's so easy for them to do that, it seems. They find Edward, they save him, and all's saved, all's right with the world again because Edward and Bella are together. Never mind that they have all this thing going on in their relationship where Edward is controlling, follows Bella around all the time, decides what Bella can do, who Bella can see, all that type of thing. None of that matters because they're destined to be together. But enough about Edward and Bella. Let's talk about Jacob, because in this book, Jacob is developed quite well. And thankfully for that, because I think this book would have been just awful, totally awful, if Jacob wasn't developed better in this story. I like Jacob's storyline. It felt quite compelling. His fear about what's going on in his neighborhood, with his friends, his best friends just vanishing and not being around him anymore. And he's wondering about that. He's sure there's a gang in his neighborhood and it's not good. And he's worried they're going to come for him as well. And he's not sure what's going on. But then later on, he finds out what's going on because it's not just a street gang. It's a bunch of werewolves, and it links into their heritage, their history. And he becomes a werewolf as well. Or I think Stephenie Meyer, the author, decided to call them shapeshifters for some reason and not werewolves. And she tried to play around with mythology a bit in these books, but I think all those thoughts she had about mythology and playing around came later on, after she wrote the stories. I don't think she actually had those ideas in the first place. It just seemed to me there were ideas that were built upon questions people had about the books. But anyway, Jacob is a werewolf or a shapeshifter. They turn into wolves. They turn into wolves at whim, basically. But also when their emotions run wild. And it just seems like these young guys, their emotions run wild all the time. And because Jacob is a werewolf, he can't be friends with Bella. Because vampires and werewolves can't be friends. They're enemies. And they have this imaginary line in the area where they can't cross, or they shouldn't cross. And Bella's all torn about this because she wants to be friends with both of them. And I think Bella's even in love with both of them, but she denies it to herself. And she just wants both of them, I think, in this story. And when Edward comes back, it throws more spanners in the works because, Edward is her true love, her destiny. But also, she likes Jacob, and she may be falling in love with Jacob as well. And we know by now, Jacob loves Bella. We have this strange love triangle going on, and I don't know if it is a love triangle. I don't want to call it that actually, because it doesn't work for what it is. It's more like a controlling triangle, a guilt-ridden, coercive, emotionally charged, emotionally wrong triangle, because things happen between them that just aren't romantic. We have controlling Edward, following Bella around, demanding she do this, demanding she go there, kidnapping her even and holding her somewhere when he doesn't like what she's doing. We have Jacob trying to emotionally guilt her into being friends or more. We have all those things going on in the book. And for me, that's not really signs of a stable, healthy relationship, is it? So I'm not sure what Stephenie Meyer is trying to bring into whatever she calls romance in this series. It seems odd to me. We do have a bit of danger in this story. It does tie into the first book. So finally, we have something from the first book causing consequences in this story. It doesn't happen straight away. It happens, I think, halfway or so through the story. Victoria, who was a vampire in the first book, a vampire clan that was against the Cullens, she's returning, and she's vengeful because Edward destroyed her one true love. Victoria wants to destroy Bella, Edward's one true love, to get revenge. And Victoria's in the area. The werewolves are sensing this, and they can't stand it. They want to destroy this vampire Victoria. They want to find her and destroy her. And when Edward returns, Edward brings his family as well. And they learn about Victoria as well. And so Victoria is breaching the werewolf's turf as well in this story. That's the reason the werewolves are getting involved. So for me, when all this was happening in the story, all this talk about turf and lines and don't cross over to my area, you're not safe there, I don't want you to be there, I want you to be here, all that sort of thing. It felt like that musical Grease to me. It felt like a kind of twisted version of Grease. And I was half expecting the werewolves and the vampires to start singing and dancing like a dance-off or something, to try to battle it out dance style. I don't know. It felt like Grease the musical to me in parts of that storyline. But finally, it causes a bit of excitement in the story, a bit of tension, but not too much, because we know that anything, that reaches a climax in these books isn't much of a climax after all. There's no real consequences for the main characters, our heroes in this story, on either side, werewolf or vampire. Not yet anyway. But in summary, this book, for a long book, it is quite a long book. It's very much filler. For a YA book, there's not much excitement in the story. I understand it's trying to be a romance story, but there's not much excitement in that whole vampire werewolf thing going on. I would have thought there would have been more excitement. Being a YA book, I would have thought that you want to draw readers in by having it be exciting. And maybe that's not the reason for this story. It's a romance story. They want the teen girls to buy these books and read them and be, excited emotionally about this romance going on between Edward and Bella, because they're destined to be together. They're star-crossed lovers, if you will. But do you want teenage girls reading this and thinking this is what romance is meant to be? First off, Jacob. Now, thank goodness Jacob is developed better in this story. In the first book, he was there for a short time, not much at all. But in this book, he has a big storyline, and his storyline is compelling. His development is good, and I liked him in this story. I don't know what it means for Jacob in future books. So of course he's going to be there in future books, because even though I haven't read these books before, you hear about Team Edward and Team Jacob all the time. But I don't know how his character will evolve. So for me, in this story, he's showing signs of a good character. There are some traits in there to him that I don't enjoy, but overall, so far, he's a good character. Alice, who's Edward's sister, I like Alice in this book. She's written to be like a risk-taker, a go-getter, but also a supporter of Bella, almost like Bella's cheerleader in a way in this story. That gets a bit much sometimes, but overall, as a character, Alice is enjoyable. She brings some fun, some excitement into the story. The whole thing about her being psychic, I don't know, just seems a bit too easy. Just seems to drive things in the story too easily. I would have liked more of a challenge in her abilities, that sometimes she gets it wrong. Sometimes it just doesn't work for some reason. Maybe she gets over emotional and it fails, something like that. Something that just adds depth to that, those abilities she has. It just wouldn't make it so easy for Alice to be correct all the time, to be right all the time. Billy is Jacob's father in these books, and I like Billy. He's a good character. Now we have all these teenagers in the story. They take center stage. They have high emotions. They have hormones bubbling to the surface. And Billy's father's there. He's quiet. He adds balance to the story. I like his viewpoint. I like the way he's written. And for me, he feels like a rounded character. So Stephenie Meyer can write rounded characters, maybe just not teenage characters, because I think with teenage characters, she's more invested in making them emotional and high hormones and big reactions, that sort of thing. And maybe it's attractive to some teenage readers, I don't know. But Billy's father as a character is good. The thing in this story, though, with Billy's father not being a werewolf himself, and I found out there's a reason for that, some mythology the author's trying to create in kind of the universe this book's set in. But for me, I don't buy the mythology Stephenie Meyer is creating because of that. It feels like it's created on the fly because of questions about holes in the story. So for me, I would have liked it if Billy's father had been a shapeshifter or a werewolf. Even though in these books he's in a wheelchair, why not? Why not have his history being that? And his character then could have been, a bit angry about not being able to do that anymore. So I don't know. I think that would have added more depth to the character, and I think sometimes this author is creating mythology on the fly because of holes in the story. Now, on the whole, it's not a great book. For a long book, not much happens. And it's very repetitive at all the things going on, especially in those moments where Edward's away and Bella is just in a zombie-like state for many chapters. This felt so repetitive and so much filler in the book. There are more exciting parts in the book. Just when it happens though, it builds up to a climax and then there's nothing happening after that climax. There's no consequences. Everybody is safe and sound and well. Nothing there happens for our main characters that challenges them, and that's strange to me in the story. Jacob in the book, he's okay. His character is good. And thank goodness for that, because if Jacob wasn't developed so well in the book, this book would have been a complete disaster, and I rated it a 2 out of 5. A 2 because of Jacob's storyline. That's really the main reason for this rating. The writing in these books, even though this book is written better than the first book, the writing is still a bit off for me. There are parts in the dialogue I still don't like, even though it's better than book 1. But also, there are just themes and things going on in this story that I don't enjoy. On my channel, I review other fantasy books. If you enjoy fantasy, check out my channel and subscribe. On the screen now is a link to another video for a book I'm sure you'll enjoy.